Good morning. My name is Jonathan Suits. Today I'm going to be talking about 3 things about my life that you asked me to talk about. But right now I'm here live in Universal Studios, where my current position is, where I have worked for over 6 years with King Kong, E.T., and currently at the Revenge of the Mummy attraction. Good morning, Pastor. The first thing you told me to talk about was my conversion experience, and that started in 1990 when I was in a service where my dad pastored in Winchester, Virginia. The service began when the choir was singing, and the service was just really powerful. What ended up happening was there were a bunch of us kids sitting up in the balcony, and we really were just cutting up and not really paying attention to anything. And suddenly we saw some things happening in the service, and before we knew it, we were the ones who had been caught by surprise. And we were, before we knew it, we were being prayed for, and we really just felt a need to give our lives to Christ. And it really was a powerful service for me, and it completely changed my life. And from that point on, up until age of 13, I've been really going after God and seeking after God even more passionately. Things have happened in my life that I've encountered that have not always been easy, but I would say that it's the best decision I've ever made. And it's not always easy, but it's worth it. And I can always rely on God because I know I can trust Him. He might not be always somewhere I can see Him, but there's someone that I can talk to on my own and that I can trust. Before I go into my second point about talking about baptism of the Holy Spirit and how I encountered that, I want to talk to you a little bit for a second about this area that I'm standing in right now. When I was hired at King Kong to be a spieler in 2001, my trainer showed me this little alleyway right here as a cut through to get to the Mel's Diner mini grill. And if you look around with the camera, you can see some really cool shots, and these have been customized by Universal's production team to look like a back street of Universal Studios. And it's always been a pleasure working here, and always been a pleasure to work in an environment for a period of my life where it's not necessarily a religious environment, because it allows me to get out of the box and to notice that there is a world out there that needs Christ, and that in some way I can impact differently than just in a church setting, that I have, since I was in high school, had a chance to impact people here in a normal work setting environment, along with an entertainment industry. Right now I want to talk about the baptism in the Holy Spirit that I experienced. And a lot of people view baptism in the Holy Spirit as something that is just a noise, or something that's crazy, something that people laugh at. Even people on like 2020 and Dateline and Newsline have examined spiritual phenomena in the brain. And for me, baptism in the Holy Spirit is a real experience. It is a gift that I experienced at the age of 13. I was living in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, where my dad pastored, and we had a team of discipleship team for the children's ministry at the church. And we were, some of us were 12, some of us were 13. We were around the preteen age. As we were beginning this new discipleship called the Rock program, there was a third elevation stage, and we had a service where we were all in the Family Life Center, and we were all just sitting there praying, and there was a concert by my friend Karen Tedder, and before we knew it, we were all baptized in the Holy Spirit. We'd experienced that gift. We'd experienced the gift of tongues and the gift of a prayer language. And we didn't understand it. We didn't understand quite what it was, but we even began to see things manifested after that. We would go to churches around the area, and we would lay hands on sick people and they would recover. We have documented cases of our discipleship group of kids. There were about 10 of us going to churches and doing dramas, and then going and praying for people in the congregation, and people's ears being opened and blind eyes being opened. And that has actually been documented by the church and by some people in the area that have kept record of that. So to a lot of people it would seem unusual and far out, but this is the experience that I've had, and this is how I know God, and I know Him to be real in more ways than one. The third point that you were asking me to discuss in the video was my heart for the young generation of people that are coming up and what the youth need today. Youth today don't need another program that is necessarily traditional or something that's necessarily relevant. The main thing that they need is the real authentic presence of God. And they do need it in new and relevant ways, but if the authentic presence of God is not there, then it's going to be ineffective. Example given is right here in Universal. I can tell you a story of youth groups coming here to Universal, and I would say in a roundabout way that their light was kind of not shining, if you want to use a more of a church term. A lot of the kids were being caught for drug possession and even some extreme other things, and having to be kicked out of the park. And even some of the employees here at the park are like, oh yeah, the church kids are the worst at Rock the Universe. And it's my goal with the kids that I mentor and the people that God brings into my life to have them kind of act differently. That it's possible to have fun and have a blast and be creative with your life, but at the same time you can have a different standard and you can live in a different way. And that's not necessarily shutting yourself off and saying 50 Hail Marys. It's all about a real authentic relationship with Christ and making it 21st century, that He's still real and alive in the 21st century, and He's alive through you, that you are the living presence of who He is. And my passion for the current generation is to instill that in them, to put that into them, that they can live passionately and have standards in a world with no standards. But at the same time, they don't have to necessarily show in some extreme outward way that it is that their life changes on the inward before the outward changes. And I would encourage kids not to necessarily, of course, getting away from the whole smoking and drinking and partying scene. I would definitely encourage that. But the first thing I would encourage would be a relationship with God, communication, prayer, reading of the Word, and coming and fellowshipping with their youth group and with their pastors. And my heart for young people is something that goes very deep, because I've seen people that I've gone to youth group with in the past grow up and go out in their life and they're not happy with what they're doing. And I've seen other people who are very happy with what they're doing. And the difference was that the time they were in the youth group, they focused spiritually and put their mind in the right place. And now it is, you can see the fruit of their life currently right now. And my heart for young people is one that embraces the culture of today, but turns it into the lens of Christ. You look at the culture of today through the lens of Christ. And looking at today's culture as Jesus would is something that is a huge key for the church to do today. Being relevant without compromising our message. And that's something that's very important, that I have a passion as well for young people, for discipleship, for encouragement, and most of all, for putting truth into their lives. As I wrap up the video, I am sitting right in front of Revenge of the Mummy, where I currently work. And I think most of all, the most important thing about this entire video that I would want to say is that it's important to have fun. And clearly, a roller coaster is an illustration of having fun. Most importantly, the kids have got to know that you are there to have fun, and you're there to be serious at the same time. You're there to learn about truth, but you're also there to learn about life will always surprise you. and there's always dark corners around life that we don't understand. And trust me, there's plenty of dark corners in this building that not many people know about, where things hide. And a lot of what's also in this building, the theming is that there are a bunch of dead tourists in here that the mummy has kind of sucked the life out of. And being a kid growing up in ministry, I know that sometimes when you are a PK, people look at you and you feel like people can suck the life out of you. But you got to understand that there's always a fun side. There's always something you can't take personally. You've got to move on. You've got to learn to take hold of who you are and your identity and move on with it. And what better place to talk about it than my current work? Yep, this is Revenge of the Mummy right here, right behind me. And that's a wrap.